Hi there, this is Timothy Dolan speaking to you today from Erbil in northern Iraq, Kurdish region. And today I'll just be reflecting on three experiences that I had, and this deals very specifically with the Yazidi people, who are ethnic Kurds and are Kurdish culturally, linguistically, but they are a separate religious community. And I won't go too much into the details of their theology, except to mention that their interpretation of Genesis departs from the Abrahamic religions in one significant way, in that in their version of Genesis, Lucifer's rejection of God's command to bow down before his newest creations of Adam and Eve were seen as a test, that the angels were obviously a superior being to humans, so why should he do such a thing? So again, their view is that God was testing Lucifer, and Lucifer passed that particular test. Of course, then this hung the moniker of devil worshippers on the heads of the Yazidis, and they've been more or less a despised people ever since, not just among ISIS, which found it good form to slaughter them and take their women and turn them into sex slaves, but just generally among the other Sunni and other faith communities, if you will, in the region. Now, the situation is this: there's 500 to 600,000 Yazidis who have been displaced out of the mountains of northern Iraq and Syria, and they're not going back. They're now living in camps. The camps are not great. They are borderline squalid. These camps were always initially set up for a 6-month stay. That was in 2014, and the people are still there. And the camps range in size from 14,000 units to a few thousand. That doesn't mean 14,000 people. That means sometimes significantly large family groups, maybe 8 or 9 people in a single room. I visited 2 of the camps. One was informal, meaning that it wasn't an official camp. It was basically squatters by the side of a road in a field, and there were several hundred of them. There was an NGO which had an orphanage / children's center that was run by a German NGO and staffed by German Kurds. The Kurds are many of them had immigrated to Germany. That's the largest diaspora community for the Kurds. And these mostly college students have come back and are operating this particular very small, modest, but I would say effective children's center, offering these kids some sort of future and at least some meals and a place to shower and bathe. I mean, the basics. So that was one introduction to what's going on with the Yazidis. These were all Yazidi kids. And I should mention from the outset that the true Yazidi orphans are really stuck because they're basically disowned by everybody. The Kurds don't want them. The Iraqi government refuses, and it's a matter of Iraqi law. No orphans can be adopted in Iraq. Now, I won't say this is the bright side, but it is informational. Many of these kids, even though they may not have a father, the father may have been an ISIS fighter, and maybe the mother had died in the ISIS episode, but they usually have an extended family. So many of them have an uncle or another more distant relative who they have been gathered up by. But again, it's a very fuzzy picture. We really don't know what the true fate of these kids will be. in my view, doesn't look good. Because right now, again, based on the fact that many of them were the issue of ISIS fighters, they're now about 4 years old. And they can't be adopted. So what's going to happen is they will be in an orphanage until they're age 18. And you can only imagine that this is in essence a kind of prison sentence. They're in a limbo. Maybe afterwards they can emigrate upon their 18th birthday, and they're taken out of the orphanage. But it's really up in the air. Nobody cares to face this. Nobody is facing this prospect. I went to a second camp, and this is the big one, the Sharia camp. It's, again, the 14,000 unit camp, where there was another effective NGO, now finally building some more permanent facilities, because these refugees aren't going anywhere. They're not returning back into the hills of northern Iraq and Syria. They're just not going to go. And the reasons for that are the geopolitical aspirations of Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. The Yazidis are in the way. The Iraq government, under basically tutelage by Iran, is busy creating a Shia corridor stretching from Baghdad, Basra, all the way across northern Iraq to Syria, and then ultimately to Lebanon. And Turkey has its own agenda. Again, Yazidis are in the way. And, Syrian government, of course, is working with the Iraqi Shia and the Iranians to accomplish this. So the Yazidis are stuck. They can't go back. They are facing what I would consider to be extermination by neglect. The West doesn't dare face this. There's simply no action by governments in the West to do anything about this. And to be fair, to some extent their hands are tied, but on the other hand, they could influence Iraq sufficiently to at least get these kids adopted outside. There are cultural objections to this, most notably a resistance to adoption outside of the faith. And that seems to be a major hang-up here. So the kids are sort of stuck because of that kind of thing, even though the Yazidis themselves are not considered Islamic among the Sunni nor the Shia. So what to do? We can only speculate. A colleague who is a Kurdish scholar and comes from a Yazidi family, by the way, is, when I asked him, we took a trip together, visited the camp, and he was gracious enough to take me to Erbil, which is where I am currently waiting for a flight out. I asked him about, what do the Yazidis see as their future? And his answer was simply that they have no future. They see no future. Their future is to emigrate to Europe. That's all they aspire to. I don't know if that's really realistic, but that's where they're going to be. Otherwise, they're in these camps. And they're in these camps probably for another generation at least. Now they're free to go. They can come and go. The men can go out, be taxi drivers. The women are being taught some rudimentary sewing skills and some other things that NGOs are trying to provide them with, some basic skills. But these are skills that are simply going to lock them into poverty. Textile work is simply poverty work. It just is. It's that way all over the world. So sorry to be so bleak about this. I guess I might be able to end on a bit of an up note that one of my students at the American University of Kurdistan, who himself is a Yazidi, albeit he happens to come from a fairly prosperous family, has just been accepted for a summer session in an institute that's being conducted in Czechoslovakia. So he'll be able to leave the country, at least for the summer, and get certification in what is in essence a kind of refugee management workshop. We'll see where all that goes, but I guess that's as up a message I can give at this point. The Kurds are wonderful people, very charming. They are in a bad neighborhood, and among the Yazidis themselves, they are essentially seen as expendable, and I think that is the world's loss. So Tim Dolan from Erbil, and let's see where things go. It's not looking good. Thanks.